management is messy. And it's, in my experience, it's often viewed as a compliance headache or something, an administrative part of HR that no one looks forward to. It can be problematic. So, there's ripple effects into, some of the issues that you can run into. And that's where I want to start. And so to kick things off, Allison and Jessica, let's talk about what's broken. And I'm gonna pick on you, Allison, to start us off.
No pressure. Yeah, I find this space, obviously I'm biased because I live and breathe the leave of absence space, specifically parental leave. But I think when you take a step back and look at the leave of absence space, it's so challenging for a variety of reasons. And I kind of view this as there are three big buckets of challenges. The first, as you mentioned, is the compliance, filing, pay side of things, which is, I mean, it's almost obvious why that is so critical. You have to do it as a company. It is something that if you do it wrong, there's all of this legal compliance risk. It's also really important, obviously, to employees to make sure that they get paid when they should get paid. So it's incredibly important. And it's also really hard to get right. There are different laws across different states, different ways of structuring this with different types of insurance and whatnot. So that is one huge challenge within the leave space. But then there are these other challenges that come after that. So in my view, and what I've seen a lot of companies look at this problem is they have to tackle that first bucket first, and it's really hard to get right. But then there are these other two buckets. And the second one I would say is sort of the business continuity and career continuity bucket, which is really where I live and breathe every single day. So, okay, great. We've figured out a system or brought in a vendor to Tilt to support that filing and leave experience. But now we've got to figure out managers who say, well, how am I supposed to deliver when I'm one or two people down? And the sales rep who says, well, what do I do with my prospects? Who's going to take over my deals? How will I be paid for these deals while, I'm out on leave? So it becomes more of like this business problem at that stage to figure out what in the world do we do now that we've nailed sort of like the logistical side of pay and policy of like, how does this actually work in practice? And then there's this third bucket, which is what is happening at home that maybe isn't directly related to work, but is actually very much impacting the way that you show up at work. So whether that is lack of childcare, if you're returning from parental leave, or you don't have backup care, these are things that historically it's been sort of like, well, that's the home life thing, right? But it is actually very related to the employee experience and how they show up for work. And I think what makes these three buckets really interesting or challenging, the way, depending on your attitude towards if this is fun or exciting types of challenges, is who should be involved in the solutions. The first bucket is fairly clear. Yes, that is absolutely HR's mandate to figure that out. The second and the third become really interesting because I think everyone can relate to the fact that like HR can do the best job on the planet, but if your manager was awful to you or said the wrong thing or excluded you from something, it almost doesn't matter what HR did, right? And so this is where this gets really interesting because all three of these buckets matter and they're also owned by different people or many people all at once. And so I think where this conversation today gets really interesting is what can HR do? What should they be doing? Because even if they're not necessarily responsible for that third bucket of, what happens at home or the second bucket, there are a lot of different things that HR leaders can do to support the rest of the company in creating that environment that is most supportive.
Love that. All great points. Jessica, that's a perfect segue also. So Jessica, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, so I want to give context that I've personally been through 2 leaves. I'm actually currently still on parental leave until mid-May. And then I've also, as an HR exec, I've administered leave. So I'm coming at this from 2 sides, but I definitely think nowadays coverage needs to feel like you are being supported. So it needs to feel supportive. If you're just doing the compliance part of this, where it's just, this is your paperwork, this is what you do, people are not receptive to that right now. Like they want to feel like you care. And so the flexibility, feeling empathetic, like they can actually talk to you, that is non-negotiable now. I feel like in the beginning of my career, about 12 years ago, it really was just send you the documents. You send me back the documents, leave, good luck, let me know when you're coming back. Whereas now that's not the case. People want to have conversations. They want to feel like you're invested in them actually coming back because they're juggling caregiving or mental health or whatever is going on in their real life. It's bigger than approve this leave and then just come back to work. And so thinking about it as like a whole, like bring your whole self to work, this is a whole person experience. It's not just here's your leave and come back whenever you're ready. And so the policies need to feel like there is more to it than just the paperwork. So even just having a conversation with somebody, and I feel like a lot of times HR practitioners, we get this stamp on us of like, it's reactive instead of being proactive. And so kind of getting ahead of things, like what is something that someone needs? A lot of times when I'm administering leave, I will tell someone like, let me know and let's have an interactive conversation about it. And I want you to feel like I'm basically holding your hand the whole way through. No matter what you're going through, I'm going to hold your hand. I'm going to be there. I'm going to follow up with you. You let me know how much you want me to be involved and I will take your lead on that. And to listen more and assume less. So don't make an assumption. So let's talk about parental leave. I'm on parental leave right now. Don't make an assumption that I don't want you to contact me at all. Like I actually want to know what's going on. I don't want to come back to work and be overwhelmed. So just taking that as an example of like what is broken is like people want to feel like you're invested in that it's not just the compliance paperwork side of it. And I think a lot of people miss that in even if you just start there and you get the paperwork right, that's one thing, but like it's the rest of it too, because if not, people feel very much slighted nowadays if they don't feel like you see them as a whole person.
Oh my God. I love that framing. Leave should be approached as a whole person experience. I mean, it certainly wasn't the way it was handled, way back in the day when I experienced it personally, but it makes complete sense. And so, Jen, I know you've seen the operational side of things up close through your client partnerships. And so share with us like what's happening on the ground. What are some of the things, the recent things that you've been seeing with your clients?
I don't think Allison and Jessica could have painted the table any more accurately. It is exactly right on to what we see with our HR business partners and our payroll teams. And I would add that every single day there's more complexity put on their plate because this leave space is so dynamic. So they are having to grapple with what was a paid leave law in California last month potentially has changed. And the bar of knowledge retention has become, in my opinion, completely untenable for anyone in the HR profession to have in their head anymore. And so our heart really goes out to our HR partners to have to navigate an increasingly complex and increasingly convoluted and ultimately fear-inducing landscape as they're trying to do what they do best. I love to Jessica's point, which is be an awesome human and be there for the human parts of leave. So that's where, there's no better application for technology, in our opinion, than to automate the automatable. This is a largely, as you've heard, compliance-rich space that needs a bunch of logic put behind it. And there's tens of thousands of permutations of a leave. So let's automate that so that humans can come to the forefront and be supported through any number of constructions of leave. And at the heart of it, and I want to amplify the message from Jessica, it is a solution of one. Solutions of many or peanut butter spread just simply does not work anymore. So any type of orientation around that is just falling on its face. It really, truly is so personal, so personal.